When trolls come out and they have fake name accounts and they don't have their real photo on there, and they don't have their real name on there, and they pop off from their mother's basement or whatever, and it could be either way, it could be left or right, and they say some really nasty, incendiary things, sometimes threatening things that they would never say to a person's face.
It's not just weirdos in their mom's basement. These are a lot of paid guys. There are people who are paid to do this. When my column was in the Denver Post, I really enjoyed it. These 8 to 12 guys who would always basically say the same-ish thing. Mm-hmm. They would say, what an embarrassment for the Post. How can the Post do this? The Post should fire this guy. I've lost respect for the Post. And what it was pressure for them to fire me. And then one day, I wrote a column, and none of them commented. Not a single, out of these 12 guys, not a single one commented. Which means one of three things. One, either I was so persuasive in my comments that they were like, yeah, give the devil his due, he did okay on this one. Or they were all sick or on vacation on the very same day. Mm-hmm. Or it was one guy who is paid to go through all these, and he was sick or out of town that one day. We started talking about the cancel culture left, how they're so successful because they weaponize this stuff and they pay people, and you know the names on X, that do nothing but throw stuff at you, hopeful that some of it sticks. Mm-hmm. So they know what they're doing, and it's part of a plan.
In pro wrestling, they call it cheap heat. They're just appealing to a certain part of the crowd with these incendiary remarks, these labels, like you're saying, homophobic, xenophobic, misogynist, racist, etc. And I know what I believe.
I've worked a lifetime to achieve my reputation as a misogynist. And and some of them just call me a sexist. I'm like, no, I'm not a sexist. I'm a misogynist.
Yes, get it right.
There's a difference. Practice. So what's the state of local media? Is talk radio dead? We'll find out. But first, like and subscribe our channel. Click that little bell icon for notifications. And find the Devil's Advocate podcast on your favorite listening app. From KHOW Morning Show, Ryan Schuiling, thanks for being here. Anyone ever tell you you got a face for radio?
Many times, and usually by you, John. Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah, I've been told that for the last 30 years to myself as well. So, radio is good for us ugly people.
It is, and it provides an outlet, I think, that is not comparable to anything else that's in the space for consumers of media, whether that's the clicks that you get on TikTok and Instagram, these really brief kind of viral moments. What it still allows, and what I try to do with that, is explore the space and have these extended conversations with people like yourself. And I know you were kind of prone to do this when you had your late night talk shows. And John,
smoking cigarettes, drinking gin, and listening to cool jazz.
Well, we're drinking scotch now, and that's going to have to do. Yeah. So, I think there's still a point and purpose for talk radio and for people to tune in for the localism and that aspect of it. And that's really what I'm trying to lean into with the morning show now that I've been moved there on 630 KHOW from 6 to 10. Have these conversations with local newsmakers, be the hub of the wheel where news happens. And that's kind of evidenced itself over these last couple of weeks even, when I've seen television stations pick up on some clips from my show, build some stories around that, even have Kyle Clark of 9 News chase down Scott Bottoms at the state capitol. That was entertaining to watch. So I think we still kind of drive
Bottoms did that interview with you.
Correct.
And what is it that he said on your show that got Kyle's attention?
Well, I was driving down to the event, pints, popcorn, and Patriots in Colorado Springs, and I missed the part where Representative Bottoms talked about a pedophile ring that ran through the State House, the Senate, and the governor's office. So then I got wind of that and invited Representative Bottoms on my show to kind of expand on that. And then I asked him, well, if you have evidence of the specifics that you can mention, why don't you come out with that right now? He gave an answer to that. Kyle Clark, I don't think, found that satisfactory. Invited him on. Bottoms declined. Chased him down at the Capitol, and then the visuals from
then he didn't answer it again.
And that's kind of confusing to me. And it's such a serious allegation, right? And I've talked to various members of law enforcement, whether it's George Brockler, the 23rd DA, 2 sheriffs, Jason Mikesell in Teller County, who's also running for governor against Scott Bottoms, Steve Reams in Weld County. These local law enforcement officials that I know, like, and trust, that I think could be relied upon to follow up on an investigation with something of that magnitude, they would put everything else to the side. But what Representative Bottoms, his contention is that he didn't trust anybody in state, whether it was at the local level or the state level, law enforcement, prosecution, and that would include the names that I just mentioned. It would have to. So he went out of state, this is his contention, and has been working with the FBI, but kind of hit a dead end with that. So he says, I'm a representative in the House, I'm not an investigator myself. But again, I keep coming back to, why put that out there in the ether unless you have the goods to back it up? And so far, that has not been the case.
Yeah, it just seems like so many great Republican scandals. It's easy to make the accusations of these conspiracies. It is impossible to come up with the proof. Well, the election was stolen. All right, show me. Don't show me that. Show me. This is another example, and the pedophilia explosion of stories ever since Epstein. They're everywhere. If he has anything, he should come forward and tell it to law enforcement. In fact, if you don't, it kind of makes you an accessory.
It makes it feel desperate, too, like this might have been a Hail Mary pass that he was throwing in the context of the campaign, but with such serious implications, both to the reputation of those who are accused, and if this is true, if there are children being abused, you would want to nip that in the bud and stop it right here and now. But to let it linger right out there, and now it's a rumor, it's innuendo. And I always say this on my show, and I've gotten it really from Dan Kaplis, who has made his bones as a trial attorney with his own law firm. And that is, it's not what you know, it's not even what you believe, it's what you can prove, right? And so until or unless that happens, whether it's election integrity that you have concerns about, the 2020 election was stolen, there's a pedophile ring running through the Capitol, and another Dan Kaplis saying is, you better back it up or pack it up. And you got to come clean. You got to come out with whatever you've got, or at least enough of it to substantiate the claims. Otherwise, it's just casting aspersions.
And for me, my criticism will land a bit on Kyle Clark. It's a great story. And if there is pedophilia, then absolutely you should ask it. But the story was, one Republican saying crazy ass stuff. Right. Stop the presses. That never happens, does it? And Republicans have no power. There is no chance Scott Bottoms is going to become governor. I hate to break it to everyone else, even the super qualified folks, Barb Kirkmeyer being a perfect example of who would be a great governor. The chances of her becoming governor, it's not going to happen. And so reporting on this stuff, it helps make Republicans look as foolish as some Republicans are, but it's kind of meaningless. I get tired of the Republican bashing only because you're reporting on toddlers having temper tantrums. It doesn't matter anymore.
I think it amplifies the problem that we've witnessed within the Colorado Republican Party, though, is that they can't get out of their own way. And it's a circular firing squad. And there's much sound and fury signifying nothing. And for Kyle Clark, from that perspective, I get why he would want to follow up on that. And he was asked actually by a viewer, why do you feel compelled to cover this? And he said, well, it's a story, whether it's true or whether it's not. And that is accurate. But to your point, the kind of TMZ, National Enquirer angle to this can't be lost on the viewers. And if it's just Scott Bottoms trying to get himself into the news, well, then mission accomplished, right? He got on my show, we're talking about it. He was chased down by Kyle Clark at the Capitol, people are talking about it. So it goes back to that old saying, bad publicity is better than no publicity. But in the context, like you're saying, of a Republican Party in a state that they haven't won in since really Cory Gardner in the Senate race, now many, many years ago, being taken seriously as an alternative for the vast number of unaffiliated voters that we are here has to be paramount. And something like that, it casts doubt. It puts us right back in the blender from a Republican standpoint. And even with a Barb Kirkmeyer, like you're saying, it erodes that kind of belief that the party can be taken seriously at the state level.
Right, and that's part of it. And I get the media loves to bash Republicans. It's an easy target.
Low-hanging fruit.
It's low-hanging fruit. Britta Horn, who's a lovely lady, there's a vote of no confidence going on with her in the party, and that's going to be another news cycle. It doesn't matter. A majority, not a plurality, a majority of Coloradans are unaffiliated. They're independent voters. And then it's Republican, then it's Democrats, and the minority of minorities are Republicans. What's it going to matter to a statewide race? Not much. Will there be some differences in a small state house race? Maybe. Focus on that. There is just as much dysfunction and weirdness going on inside the Democratic ranks here in Colorado. Mm-hmm. There is a civil war brewing between the socialists and the progressives, basically old school Democrats and the hardcore communists, and it's boiling over. There are legislators who will not put their name on a bill if one of those, what do they call them, opportunity caucus Democrats are on it. There's real dysfunction. I want some reporting on that. Sooner or later, I think even the Kyle Clarks are going to have to tune into that.
Yeah, that fissure is very evident, especially when you look at the Senadora, right, Julie Gonzalez, who's mounting a primary challenge against John Hickenlooper for that Senate seat. And the traditional establishment Democrats, like Hickenlooper, like a Michael Bennet, would just assume that this die down and it go away and there's not daylight shined upon it. And with somebody like Kyle Clark, who's so influential in the news cycle, he's so big with the ratings in the Denver-Boulder corridor, and this is who he's appealing to, I think there's a calculus of what will appeal to my audience. Well, that red meat, that low-hanging fruit of going after a Scott Bottoms, the crazy holy roller preacher, that plays in Pueblo, so to speak. And with the Democrats, it's bickering, it's infighting. It really is amounting to, I think, a proverbial civil war. And that power struggle within, we don't see a lot of division when it comes to the mainstream Democrats on some of these very extreme bills, which you and I have watched come out just within this last month, that I think there are many that are in that mainstream who are afraid to push back against those socialist elements for fear of that there would be a reprisal against them. They'll get a primary challenge, and then their seat will be put back in the hopper. I can think of my own state senator, who I call the dude, Jeff Bridges, who ostensibly a moderate, but you look at his voting record, and it's indistinguishable from the radical left.
How many people do you think
bills.
get that joke, by the way?
Well, I think you did.
All right,
and for me, that's what matters. Right. So if you don't, Big Lebowski, right there, the dude. And I've called him that on my show, with him joining me. So
I think good Democrats who understand that you still need private business. We don't want to nationalize everything in Colorado. They are scared to death to stand up in front of and fight the hardcore leftists of their own party.
Correct.
I think our governor is scared to do that. I'm very curious to see what the rest of the session is like. Will this, being his last session, will he stand up and actually stand up for business and industry? We'll find out. If he's ever going to do it, now's the time to do it. And it just shows you the cancel culture that the left has on that hardcore socialistic left, that, man, they will do anything to win because it's a revolution for them. This is not just policy. No, this is winning at all costs. And people get run. It reminds me a lot of Dudley Brown in the past with Rocky Mountain gun owners. Yeah. He did the most underhanded, dirty, disgusting campaigns of against good Republicans to get some crazy guy to win in the primary. That crazy guy would never win in the general. And it's one of the reasons Republicans lost the House. But he would make these unfounded comments and destroy people's lives with these lies. And I see the left, I think, has emulated that and one-upping him.
I think there's a path, though, to being different and standing out, and it goes through Pennsylvania with two figures. It's Senator John Fetterman, who's not afraid to stand up to his own party and often grabs headlines in the process. And he's probably going to win re-election by a 60-40 margin or something close to it in a purple state. It also is that state's governor, Josh Shapiro, who, but for being Jewish, for whatever reason, this radical anti-Semitic kind of faction within the Democratic Party would never allow him to become the nominee, although he would probably be the strongest one. And he's not afraid to stand up to the radical left elements when you see some of this stuff coming out in Philadelphia with the district attorney there, or Zoran Mamdani and this Democratic Socialist push. We see AOC making a fool of herself overseas, not being able to answer a basic question about China. So you have that path. And if we look at this from a Governor Polis standpoint, you're a libertarian. He claims to be a libertarian. I'm failing to find anything really libertarian about him, unless it might come to the abortion issue. But if he's looking for a path and a plan to run for president, and we know that he is in 2028, then what he would be well served to do is to stand up to some of these bills coming through the General Assembly and say, you know what? No, I am not going to infringe upon the Second Amendment rights of Coloradans, which are so important to them. I am not going to continue to do this end-around Tabor for individual taxpayers in the state of Colorado to get their refunds and to feel like they have a say in that process. If he truly is about individual liberties, rights, and freedoms, Jared Polis needs to stand out rather than rubber stamp all of these bills.
Not only are you ugly, you're also wrong. And let me explain it. In order for him to become president, and this is his calculation, he's got to get through the primary system. He's got to get through caucuses. And the hard left owns those caucuses.
You're right.
He knows that he has to push gun control, which I know personally he does not support.
Exactly.
He has to push these special interest tax breaks, which he said when he campaigned that he would be against. He knows better. If there's a guy who knows better than what it's Jared Polis. But he, too, has to run that gauntlet of democratic socialism. And it's too bad. You know, if Jared Polis was sitting as governor with a Republican House and a Republican Senate here, he would be one of the best governors in the country. He would say yes to pro-business issues. He would say yes to tax cuts. He would say no to social conservative issues that turn off most Coloradans. He would be wonderful. He's the right governor with the wrong legislature.
I still think he's a political animal, though, and is looking out for his best interest. It's not necessarily a criticism. He has gotten where he is because of those calculations. And you're absolutely right. The Democratic Party is being held hostage by this democratic socialist, communist element. And we see the Zoran Mamdani, who I mentioned before. It's going to take somebody with a special spine to stand up and go, no, this is how we're going to run things. And in that Fetterman, Shapiro kind of vein, say we're going to get back to who we were. We're not going to be on the 20% side of 80-20 issues. And there's so many of those happening right now.
I think Rahm Emanuel is grooming himself to be that guy.
And he would be in that lane, correct.
Yeah.
But if Polis just kind of tries to keep up with the Joneses and is trying to straddle that fence and is trying to play to the left and kind of veer over, like you're saying, and you're probably right, then he's not going to stand out from a Gavin Newsom, from everybody else that's going to be running, and he's just kind of wither into the wind.
Let me throw this one out. He's not going to become president, not because he's gay, but because he's Jewish. And that same primary system that you have to run through the gauntlet of extremist Democrats to get the nomination, they are becoming so rapidly anti-Semitic that it's not the gay thing. No, that's a plus for them. He's a Jew, and therefore we can't elect him. I think that's the main reason he won't be able to win that.
And that would be the same strike against Shapiro that we talked about earlier with the governor of Pennsylvania. I see there, like you said, had Jared Polis had a Republican General Assembly, it's wild to think about, but you're right. I think his calculations would change. And I think he would be more true to the core of probably who he is politically.
Yeah. He was actually a rather decent congressman from a very liberal district. He was pro-business, he was pro-tax, he was pro-gun. He wasn't bad. He wasn't bad. You know what? I want him to kick him back to the Senate. That's what Ryan Schuiling runs the morning show on 630 KHOW. Let's talk a little bit about the morning show. You haven't been doing this long. This is an anchor program for the station. Who'd you pay off to get the gig?
Well, I think it was a matter of convenience from inside, and I say that kind of half jokingly, but I was already there. I'm helping as the executive producer for Dan Kaplis show, which continues in that vein. I was already doing a show from 2 to 4. So I think moving the furniture around, as it were, there are other dominoes that preceded that. And it's interesting because, as you mentioned, 630 KHOW is kind of the little brother of KOA. And from there, we have seen, I think, every single one of the talk opinion hosts now on KOA at one time were the morning show host on 630 KHOW. And that was Mandy Connell, followed by Ross Kaminsky, followed by Michael Brown, who was on KOA at one time. Now he's circled back around to do that. So I think it made a lot of sense from internal standpoint to move me into that block. It's tough for me, I'll be very honest, because you and I are similar. I'm a night owl.
So I had the late night show on KOA for years. Oh, it was so delicious. It was so fun. Mostly because management was in bed, and so they would leave you alone, and KOA Signal would broadcast to Mexico and Canada because it's 50,000 watts, and at night it would just go through. It was just so wonderful. But that type of local radio doesn't work anymore. Why pay for a local show when you can just plug in a syndicated program? And it's just sad. The power of talk radio continues, I think, to shrink and shrink and shrink. But there's still a place for it. Talk to me a little bit about the demographics. Yeah. I have found the demographics for talk radio has changed since I started nearly 30 years ago in talk radio. It was a pretty diverse audience there, and I put out the call, and you get liberals, you get socialists, you get conservatives, and the debates we'd have with callers would be great. Now that kind of interchange, it's not there. They do the talk back, which is a recorded comment from a listener. And it seems to be more grumpy old men who can't figure out how to find podcasts listening to radio. Tell me I'm wrong. I'd like to be wrong.
Well, you're right. And how we change that is we have to appeal in talk radio to a younger audience and how they consume media. So that requires some adjustments on the fly to be very flexible and malleable. And to
in what ways?
To reach them where they are, meaning in a podcast format. Now, that's not going to appeal, like you said, to an older listener, but that's not really who the podcast format is intended for. So you go and you're able to develop kind of viral moments. I'm very active on X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, which kind of trends more to an older crowd than X does. I think the next step would be, and this is something that we've been exploring with the sports coverage on KOA, getting into TikTok and Instagram and these newer kind of platforms that younger people are more able and likely to consume. And it's smaller bites, it's viral moments, and hopefully that expands into a broader conversation. But that's counterintuitive to what talk radio was with you, what it is with me.
Talk radio, in the glory days of Rosen and Boyles, I did the late night show and I'd fill in for both of them. It was glorious. Is that people come to you. It's in the morning, you turn it on. When I was a kid, you turn on KOA to find out if your school's closed. Now you go online. And so it was a destination. Now younger folks, you got to spoon feed it to them. It's in their hand, and the algorithm picks it up and shoves it in front of them in a 30-second clip. And if you get that, you get these moments. And so the product is different than the long, truly luxurious conversations I would have over hours late night with people. And it was a different tempo. So do you find yourself thinking in short bursts of, that clip will make a good 30-second clip?
100%. I think the presentation that I've adapted for the morning show is to keep things moving. I think it's all about pace. If people feel like they're part of a ride, if an hour doesn't feel like an hour, if you can condense that. I have bits that I do coming back from breaks. I focus largely on sound bites, interviews, interactions. I've reopened the phone lines. That has not been the case in that space. Michael Brown just runs his show a different way. He's got a very traditional approach, and I think he's got a broader kind of spectrum of who he appeals to.
It's kind of the difference between, I live off of callers, and I want callers. I want people to disagree with me. That's what talk radio is all about: is a civil but vibrant argument. And then there are the types who are Michael Brown, great friend, a great radio guy, and Rush Limbaugh, who give you analysis and give you their opinion. Don't take many calls, but might have guests on. Yeah, it's a different thing. I think you do well with calls too.
Thank you, and I'm looking to do more of that. Kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, what Dan Kaplis has kept open and available. The reason for that, in my view, is what makes local talk radio different? And particularly, what makes it local? It's that a person has access to a host like John Caldera or yours truly. They feel they can text, they can get a response. They can call, they can talk directly to me. They can send a talk back, I'll respond to it. It's interactive. They have stake in the game. They have something where they have agency where they wouldn't have, whether they're listening to a national podcast or watching cable news, any kind of other show. That's what makes it unique and different to have that pipeline, that direct access to the host. And I want to be as accessible as possible. And that's the magic of what you experienced in having those robust debates.
I'll put it slightly differently. Communist Russia had a state-of-the-art broadcast system. Their phone systems were third world because they did not want people talking amongst themselves. Mm-hmm. They wanted the message to come from up high. This is what thou shalt think. In America, we have NPR. This is what thou shalt think. We've got newspapers. This is what thou shalt think. And before the internet, the only place you could challenge media was on talk radio. You pick up the phone and you've got access to the same radio waves, unedited, as the guy who's telling something that's wrong. And it was a different animal. And so it was like a constant letters to the editor section, but the editors couldn't censor you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what made it so good. I also think that's why leftist talk radio never really took off. Right. Air America never really worked out because I don't think they could handle the back and forth of callers. They could only monologue. And if you're going to listen to monologues, listen to the best ones. And NPR does the best of those. Mm-hmm. So that's the magic of talk radio, the local and the back and forth. I just wish there weren't as many commercials. How are you going to survive that?
We got to pay the bills, and that's how it's done in modern commercial radio.
Yeah, but it wasn't that way before.
Not quite to that.
I remember back in my day,
here we go.
We had like maybe a commercial an hour, and it was for American apple pie, not this Viagra stuff. No, listen, if it wasn't for old men not being able to get it up, there'd be no AM talk radio because every third ad is definitely for erectile dysfunction.
There are a lot of ads along those lines, hair loss included in that too. What I'm trying to burst out of is I have an ideological point of view. So does John Caldera, and I'll express that, and I want to be honest about that. What people hear is my honest opinion. Nobody can buy or sell it. Nobody can tell me what to think or do. iHeart has never come to me and say this, don't say this. That is a freedom that I think not a lot of people enjoy. Secondary to that point is breaking out of these echo chambers. And what I've really tried to do is have people come on as guests that might disagree. This could be, and it's a small list, I can count them on one hand. Jeff Bridges, the dude, the senator was one of them. I've had him on the show before, looking to do it again. Amanda Sandoval, she's on the city council. She is very far left, but she'll readily come on. I'll give her immense credit on conservative talk radio. It's an away game for them, to use a sports analogy. But one in particular that stands out to me is Tricia Calvarese, who is a Democrat candidate for Congress. And when I first called her, she was very enthusiastic to come on. And there were handlers and advisors of hers that were telling her, don't do it. Don't go on conservative talk radio. You got nothing to gain. You have everything to lose. There's no reason for you to do it. But she defied that. And not only that, she comes in studio. We have a robust debate. It's kind of like what you're talking about with callers. And I think it's just more interesting radio. I have a point of view. She has a point of view. She's not afraid to defend her position. She comes into the gauntlet, into the arena, defends that position against me. And I just think listeners gain more from that than just, again, and this is right and left, the echo chambers that continue to exist.
Something else happens. And I say this as an old man now. Mm-hmm. Something else happens. You end up seeing your opponent as a person.
Correct.
Instead of what we have now, which is, nearing violence, that's just the other person and to hell with him. No, I would have Ken Gordon on, and Ted Trimpuck still comes on to this show. I mean, we have these great fights, and so often we actually become friends. Mm-hmm. And that type of dialogue really does matter. And there's not that many places you can get it. You can't get it on social media because all you get is screaming. You really need to bring people in person. And I think shows like this and shows like yours do that.
I love that. And there's so much to be said for the need to facilitate that discussion, that engagement with one another, to humanize one another. We see so much of the opposite. I think in particular, what a turning point was for me, pun intended, I guess, was the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and that we can't have the discussions that he was looking to facilitate on college campuses with people whom he disagreed, and having those robust debates and doing it in a setting where it's a classical liberal argument, right? I may disagree with you, but I'll defend to the death your right to say what you have to say.
Which is no longer the standard operating procedure for many people on the left. When you've got laws against misgendering, that is a speech control law. When you've developed generations of people to look for offense first, I find that offensive. Well, finding something offensive is a way to say, I'm not going to engage with that because you're a racist, instead of engaging. So it's, there's a corollary. If you're going to say, I defend to my death your right to say it, it also means I defend your right to say it the way you wish to say it, and therefore I've got to engage.
And again, if we humanize one another, if we have the conversations, if we realize that we have far more in common than we don't as Americans, and we use that as a starting point, we can have really fun, robust debates, and they can be substantive, and they can be heated. But at the end of the day, how it was when I was in college in the 90s, John, was I had plenty of liberal friends. In fact, most of the people that were in the broadcasting department at college were definitely the left of me, but we would joke about it, like, oh, Ryan.
I went to CU Boulder. If I didn't have liberal friends, I'd have no friends.
No friends, right? But you have a beer afterward, and everything was good, and it didn't matter. It didn't define you. It was not a scarlet letter either way. But now we have this kind of exclusionary cancel culture.
It's also different. How to put this? My liberal friends would insult me relentlessly, and I would insult them relentlessly, and we took joy in it. Yeah. We never took offense out of it. It was loving, and you cannot read X today and see anything loving.
That's another thing, and it's so important. I'm glad you brought that up. People hiding behind anonymous accounts. I'm sorry, but maybe it's because you and I are in the public sphere, and we embrace and we accept that. We're going to take heat. We know that. And we've chosen to go in that public space. But when trolls come out and they have fake name accounts and they don't have their real photo on there, and they don't have their real name on there, and they pop off from their mother's basement or whatever, and it could be either way, it could be left or right, and they say some really nasty, incendiary things, sometimes threatening things that they would never say to a person's face if they were having a one-on-one discussion, and yet they feel kind of empowered and emboldened by this anonymity. I'm just not a big fan of that. That's just me personally.
Keep in mind, it's not just weirdos in their mom's basement. These are a lot of paid guys. There are people who are paid to do this. When my column was in the Denver Post, I really enjoyed it because the hate mail was incredible. And so on the website, it was just literally hundreds of just god-awful, violent, terrible things. After every column I wrote. And there was always like these 8 to 12 guys who would always basically say the same-ish thing. They would say, what an embarrassment for the Post. How can the Post do this? The Post should fire this guy. I've lost respect for the Post. And what it was pressure for them to fire me, which they ended up doing.
They did.
And then one day, I wrote a column, and none of them commented. Not a single, out of these 12 guys, not a single one commented, which means one of three things. One, either I was so persuasive in my comments that they were like, yeah, give the devil his due, he did okay on this one. Or they were all sick or on vacation on the very same day, or it was one guy who is paid to go through all these, and he was sick or out of town that one day. So you look at it and go, this is why we started talking about the cancel culture left, how they're so successful, because they weaponize this stuff and they pay people, and the names on X, that do nothing but throw stuff at you, hopeful that some of it sticks. For you and I, we're not running for office. Who cares? But if you run for office and you get labeled a racist, well, that could come back to bite you. And then there's this forever trail on social media. So they know what they're doing, and it's part of a plan.
In pro wrestling, they call it cheap heat. They're just appealing to a certain part of the crowd with these incendiary remarks, these labels, like you're saying, homophobic, xenophobic, misogynist, racist, etc. And if you get stuck with that, to me, whether it's you or myself in that space, I laugh that off because I know who I am. And I know what I represent, and I know what I believe.
I've worked a lifetime to achieve my reputation as a misogynist, and and some of them just call me a sexist. I'm like, no, I'm not a sexist. I'm a misogynist.
Yes, get it right.
There's a difference. Practice. All right, hey, let's wrap it up with this. I'm thrilled you got the morning show gig. It's a tough world in AM radio these days, as there are fewer ways to listen to AM, as cars makers don't want to have it on, and there's so many choices. But definitely worth following you on X and Facebook. What are those handles? It's my name, at Ryan Schuiling. The last name's Dutch. It's weird. I have one too many vowels. If you need to buy a vowel, Wheel of Fortune style, you can have one. RyanSchuiling. 6 to 10 every morning on 6:30 KHOW. Mm-hmm. Ryan, thanks a lot. Thanks, John. Thank you. Think freedom. Did you enjoy that conversation? Well, check out one of these. We have the most interesting conversations with Colorado's most fascinating people. Be sure not to miss a single one. Like, subscribe, hit that little bell icon. And if you can't watch, listen. Check out the Devil's Advocate podcast on your favorite listening app. And by all means, think freedom.